By the 27th of April 1945, the situation in Berlin was hopeless. Heavy fighting continued throughout the city as Soviet forces fought their way into the central government district, the most heavily defended sector. The 11 worn-out divisions of the 9th Army had become encircled south of Potsdam, while the 3 remaining divisions forming the 12th Army had not been able to break through the Soviet encirclement to effect a junction with the 9th Army or break into the city to rescue Hitler and the other trapped leaders. Morale in the Führer bunker was sinking rapidly, especially as Soviet tanks had reached the Wilhelmplatz in the center of the government sector. Hitler began to look to the future survival of the institutions of the Nazi state. 2 men stood out among all those that he had felt had let him down or betrayed him, 2 men who had not done either. Field Marshal Ferdinand Schörner, the hard and ruthless commander of Army Group Center, still holding on in western Czechoslovakia, and Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz, the commander of the Kriegsmarine, the German Navy, commanding all German forces in northern Germany, Denmark and Norway. Dönitz had promised naval reinforcements for Berlin, and he had been true to his word, managing to send in hundreds of sailors via aircraft to help prolong the hopeless resistance. Early on the 28th of April, Hitler sent messages to Field Marshal Wilhelm Keitel and Colonel General Alfred Jodl, the leader of the German armed forces and the Army General Staff, respectively, to make the relief of Berlin the absolute priority. But though these officers urged on the shattered units to undertake this hopeless task, no word was heard from Wenck's 12th Army. The final straw was the discovery of the betrayal of Heinrich Himmler. The Reichsführer SS was discovered to have been secretly negotiating with the Western Allies behind Hitler's back. Hitler ordered Himmler arrested, but the Reichsführer was already in the north of Germany, and Dönitz was careful not to antagonize the still powerful leader of the SS. Hitler now attended to his legacy. Shortly after midnight on the 29th of April 1945, he married his longtime girlfriend, Eva Braun, in a short ceremony in the bunker. Just prior to this, Hitler had dictated his last will and testament to his secretary, Traudl Junge. Importantly, this document dealt with the succession to Hitler following his death, an event that must come soon. With both Hermann Göring and Heinrich Himmler both disgraced, Hitler broke up the office of Führer and appointed Dr. Josef Goebbels, his ever-loyal propaganda minister, Reich Chancellor, and Grand Admiral Dönitz, Reich President. Command of the army was to go to Field Marshal Schörner. Martin Bormann, his scheming private secretary, was appointed party minister and executor of Hitler's will. Though radio messages would be dispatched to inform the new leaders of their promotions after Hitler's death, Hitler also demanded that physical copies of the last will and testament and also his marriage license be sent out of Berlin and delivered to the recipients. The Führer and Bormann looked to the pool of now unemployed adjutants and aides to undertake this hazardous assignment. The initial group of couriers consisted of 4 men. Major Willi Johann Meyer, Hitler's army adjutant, was ordered to take a copy of the last will and testament to Field Marshal Schörner at his headquarters. He would be accompanied by his batman, or military servant, Corporal Hummerich. The second courier was Propaganda Minister Goebbels' man Heinz Lorenz, Hitler's deputy chief press secretary. He had orders to take a copy of the last will and testament to the Gauleiter of Munich, Upper Bavaria, Paul Giesler. The third courier was Martin Bormann's adjutant, SS Standartenführer or Colonel Wilhelm Sander, with orders to go to Dönitz in the north of Germany. The 3 men said goodbye to Hitler, and were then briefed by Bormann before being handed documents inside white folders. The 4 men were all dressed in combat uniforms and steel helmets and heavily armed with automatic weapons. At 6 a.m. on the 29th of April, the Soviets launched a tremendous artillery barrage of the government quarter, before following up with the ground assaults with infantry and tanks onto the Kurfürstendamm, Bismarckstrasse and Kantstrasse, bringing the front line to within half a kilometer of Hitler's bunker. With Johann Meyer commanding the courier group, the 4 men set off during a pause in the fighting, heading across the Tiergarten, the great public park in the center of Berlin, to the area of the Zoo Flak Tower, still held by German forces. From the zoo, the party made it safely to the Olympic Stadium. again still held by friendly forces, before heading for the Pickelsdorf Bridge over the Havel River, held by a battalion of around 600 16 to 17-year-old Hitler youths and some experienced Wehrmacht instructors. The exhausted party then rested up until midnight. Meanwhile, some of the other adjutants in the bunker had approached Hitler asking to be allowed to leave and join in the fighting, specifically to try and reach and join up with Wenck's 12th Army to urge him to attack and to relieve the city. Permission was granted in the afternoon. The aides were Major Baron Freytag von Loringhofen, aide to General Wilhelm Burgdorf, Hitler's senior army adjutant, Lieutenant Colonel Rudolf Weiss, another of Burgdorf's aides, and cavalry captain or Rittmeister Gerhard Boldt, von Loringhofen's own aide. Bormann furnished each officer with copies of Hitler's last will and testament and covering letters, and they departed the bunker in the afternoon using the same route as the first group. At midnight on the 29th of April, one final group of couriers left the Führer bunker and headed west. This consisted of Colonel Nicolaus von Below, Hitler's Luftwaffe adjutant, with his batman Corporal Heinz Mattising and one other orderly. Bormann ordered von Below to take the last will and testament and messages to Field Marshal Keitel, confirming the appointment of Grand Admiral Dönitz as Hitler's successor. Group number 2, led by Baron von Loringhofen, made it to the Olympic Stadium and rested. Group 3, Colonel von Below and his men, caught them up, and the two groups joined together, resting all day until the night of the 30th of April. The first group, led by Lieutenant Colonel Johann Meyer, continued on their journey by small boat down the Havel River, both banks under intermittent Soviet occupation or fire until they reached Wannsee Island, still held by elements of the German 20th Panzergrenadier Division. Using the unit's radio, messages were sent to Dönitz and Schörner's headquarters, and both leaders determined to send aircraft to rescue the couriers. Lieutenant Colonel Grassmann of Schörner's staff took off in a small Fieseler Fi-156 Stork liaison plane, the plan being to meet the couriers at Peacock Island on the Havel River. At the same time, a Heinkel flying boat was ordered by Dönitz to fly to Peacock Island, land in the river, and collect Lorenz and Zander. But heavy Soviet fire would ruin both of these operations. The Fieseler Storch was shot at in the air and turned back, whereas the flying boat actually landed in the Havel, near Peacock Island, but couldn't hang around for long as it too came under fire. The air evacuations were aborted, leaving Johann Meyer's group to make their way out of Berlin by boat and on foot. Whilst this drama was unfolding, Group 2, containing von Loringhofen, Boldt and Weiss, caught up with Group 1 at Peacock Island, and Group 3 crossed the Havel River by small boat and began heading west. In the event, none of the couriers managed to deliver their precious documents. Without transport and caught up in the chaos of a war zone, the men determined instead to save themselves. Willi Johann Meyer made it to his hometown of Iserlohn in North Rhine-Westphalia. He placed his copy of Hitler's last will and testament in a waterproof container and buried it in his garden, shortly before being arrested by US troops, who later recovered the documents. Johann Meyer became a company director post-war and died in Kelkheim, Hessen in 1970, age 54. SS Colonel Wilhelm Zander, Bormann's adjutant, went into hiding in the US occupation zone under the assumed surname Paustin, working as a gardener. He too was picked up by the US Army, and the Hitler documents were recovered. Zander died in Munich in 1974, age 63. Heinz Lorenz, Hitler's deputy chief press secretary, was arrested by the British. After the war, he worked in the West German Parliament in Bonn. Lorenz died in Düsseldorf in 1985, age 72. The members of Group 2 also survived. Baron Freytag von Loringhofen and Captain Boldt ditched their uniforms and obtained civilian clothing, managing to reach Wittenberg, where they registered at a camp under false names. Leaving the camp soon after, they crossed the Elbe River by boat and then swam across the Mulde River before splitting up on the 12th of May 1945. Von Loringhofen made it to Leipzig to be reunited with his family, but was arrested by the US Army and handed over to the British for interrogation. After the war, he rejoined the army, the new Bundeswehr, rising to the rank of lieutenant general and holding high NATO positions. He died in 2007 at the age of 93. His companion, Captain Boldt, lost all hope at one point during the escape out of Berlin and attempted to take his own life with a dose of morphine. Freytag von Loringhofen forced Boldt to vomit, saving his life. Boldt eventually reunited with his family in Lübeck. He was arrested by the British soon after. After the war, Boldt wrote Hitler's Last Days, which was partly used as source material for the 2004 film Downfall, or Der Untergang. Boldt died by his own hand in 1981, aged 63. The third man, Rudolf Weiss, was particularly unlucky as he was captured by the Soviets. He spent 5 years in Soviet POW and labor camps. Lieutenant Colonel Weiss died in a labor camp in Kazakhstan in the Soviet Union in 1958, age 47. Group 3's couriers also survived the war. Nicolaus von Below was arrested in the British sector in 1946. He was the only one of the couriers to have destroyed the documents he brought out of the Führer bunker. He died in Detmold, West Germany in 1983, aged 75, after writing a book about his experiences at Hitler's side. Copies of Hitler's last will and testament, recovered by the British, the Americans, and the Soviets, today reside in the national archives of all three nations, few realizing what the couriers who saved these documents went through during the last terrible days of the Battle of Berlin. Many thanks for watching. Please subscribe and share, and also visit my audiobook channel, War Stories with Mark Felton. You can also help to support both of my channels at PayPal and Patreon. Details in the description box below.